Okay, let's begin. Just one thing I want to do, Bezrat Hashem, I want to try and revisit. The last sugya was particularly difficult. Okay, so I just want to revisit the final analysis of the last sugya before we move on. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah, we're good. We're good with that. Okay. So we basically have a question about the trunk and the branches, if you remember, between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. We have a question by Maaser Sheni, and we have a question when it comes to the killing. Now, there's two parts to Maaser Sheni. One part of Maaser Sheni is that if you want to, you bring something to Jerusalem, you have to eat it in Jerusalem. So in deciding if something is in Jerusalem or not in Jerusalem, that will dictate whether or not you're able to eat it there or not able to eat it there. So let's say we decided that this tree was in, then you'd be able to eat there. If we decide the tree was not in, you would not be able to eat there. But there's a second law, which is exactly the opposite of the first law. And that is redeeming Maaser Sheni. So not eating it, actually eating it, but actually switching that thing, the money, for something else, being podeh that thing, whatever the grain that you brought up, switching it for money. You're only allowed to do that not in Jerusalem. You got it? So in any scenario where we're going to call it Jerusalem or not Jerusalem, on one level it's going to be a stringency, and on one level it's going to be a leniency. Right? Because we have competing laws depending on your status as Jerusalem. Okay? We know that Rabbi Yehuda, we're assuming, we're setting Rabbi Yehuda up that he's only saying his halakha to be strict. What that means is, says Rava, okay, says two opinions. Rava explained, all right, so what does it mean over here in our Mishnah when he said that we go after the branches? It doesn't mean that you always go after the branches. It means that in a scenario where the guy is on the trunk and the trunk is inside, you can't kill him, he's inside. If he's on the branches and he's outside, hanging outside the Ir Miklat, if you could kill him with a gun or with a knife that you threw from outside the safe zone, you're able to kill him. Why? Because he's not in the city of refuge. He's on the branches outside the city of refuge. What's the case of Rabbi Yehuda? Because he's only saying it for stringency. Okay? Remember, that means that in a scenario where it's going to be more lenient, he's not going to say his law. Because he's not sure how to, so he's only going to say it to be strict. Everyone understands what that means? If that's the case, says Rava, what's the case in the Mishnah? Is when the guy is on the branches, the tree is on the inside, but the only way, the branch is on the inside, the tree is on the outside. The only way the guy could get to the guy is if he climbs up. To climb up, what do you need to violate? You need to violate the part of the tree that's in the safe zone. You're not allowed to go in the safe zone to kill him. So I might have thought, the Rabbanan say, if the only way to get him, you can't shoot him. He's somewhere up in the tree, you can't get to him. Only way to kill him is if you physically get there. But the only way to get there is if I climb onto the trunk in order to get to the branches. Rabbi Yehuda says, in that scenario, you're able to do it because we say we go after the branches, we allow you to use the tree as a way to get to the branches, and the Chachamim say, no, you have to enter into the safe zone. You have no right to enter the safe zone. Okay? That's how Rava learns the Mishnah of follow the branches. Rav Ashi, and by the way, this is how the halakha follows, the second opinion. Rav Ashi says no. He uproots, pardon the pun, everything that we learned up until this point. He says when Yehuda says that you follow the branches, he doesn't mean you follow the branches. He means you follow even the branches.
What does that mean?
What it means is that in any scenario that I have a way, it's like a legal loophole. If I can use the legal loophole this way, I'll use it this way. If I can use it this way, I'll use it this way. These are two clauses that get me out of the stringence, that get me into the stringency. Okay? So, like as an example, when you have loose language in a contract, if I choose to interpret it in the more strict way I can, I could use it that way, or I could use it that way, depending on what benefits me more. I'll translate this to mean something strict in either scenario. Says the Gemara and Rav Ashi, when he said that we follow the branches, he means that not only will we follow the trunk, if the trunk is inside, and the branches are outside, will also follow the branches if the branches are inside and the trunks are outside. That's what he means to say. And why is it saying that, even the branches? Then it should say either way. And the answer is because in most of halakha, we follow the trunk over the branches. So we're saying over here, we'll follow even the branches for strictness. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Why is he doing this? Very simple law. Every time you have a safek deoraita, how do you go? You always go a safek on a biblical law, we go more strict. This is a biblical law. Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't know. I don't know. How do you classify a tree? By the branches or by the trunks? You know what? I'll always lean the stricter way when it comes to the deoraita. That's what Rav Ashi says, and that's how the halakha seems to follow as well. Okay, let's begin with the Mishnah. We continued with the Mishnah, and the Mishnah said, Harag, we'll do this quickly because we've covered it already. We're on 12b3. We're going to continue. Harag, but really we're starting after the next piece, the next Mishnah. But let's just do it quickly. Harag be'ota'ir, if the guy killed in that city, he goes from one neighborhood to the other. What's the logic here? You killed already. Now you have to go to exile. But now you're in exile. Now you got used to your house and your pool and your neighborhood shul. Okay? What do? Now you killed again. You now have galut for the second time. So what do? You move to another neighborhood in the same city. Okay? By the way, would he be able to go to another Ir Miklat? Absolutely. Problem is, by who? By the first Goel Adam.
Right. Oh, because once he leaves, then
he's free.
But only by the first guy. By the second guy, we said when the guy's first running to Goel Adam, you have to wait for Beit Din to say that he's classified as an accidental murderer. Remember? So what's the problem? Let him go to another city. The answer is this guy is murfed. Because if he goes to another city, the first guy will kill him. You're not allowed to leave. Okay, so he's goleh mishchuna. He goes from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. Uben Levi. What about if you have a Levite who lives already in that city? What does he do? Goleh meir leir. He goes from one city to another. Since it's the first time he's killing, he's able to go to another city. He's protected until he gets there. He goes to another one of the Levite cities. Okay, says the Gemara. Tan Rabbanan. And I will give you a place. God is talking to Moshe Rabbeinu when he's in the desert, and he says, "I'm going to give you a place," indicating that Hakadosh Baruch Hu was allowing Moshe to be able to set aside cities. We have already mentioned that those three cities were not going to be able to protect an accidental murderer. Why? Because the Torah said 6 cities. So even though Moshe was setting aside 3, until there were 6, there were none. Excellent. The title of Agatha Christie's follow-up story. And then there were none. My friends, says the Gemara, V'samti lecha, so what do we learn out? V'samti lecha, and I will set for you, B'chayecha, while you're still alive. Makom, I will give you a place. What does Makom tell you? Mim mekomecha. I'm going to give you Makom from your place. What does that come in to tell you? Mim komecha. It's the place that you're already in. Where does Moshe Rabbeinu live? He's a Levi. He lives in the city of the Leviim. So I'm going to give you a place, Mim mekomecha, in your place. So therefore, Asher Yanus Shama, that you're going to run over there. So what do we learn from here? We learned that the Jewish people were being exiled for accidental murderers in the Midbar. And where did they go? They went to the cities of the Leviim, the camp of the Leviim in the middle of Am Yisrael. But they were not using the cities that Moshe Rabbeinu set aside. Why? Because until there were 6, there were none. Says the Gemara, Mikan Ameru, we learn from here, Golem mi pelech lepelech, a Levi that kills goes from one area to another area. Why does he go from one area to another area? For the same reason as the Israel. If an inadvertent murderer needs to go to a place that's Galut, if the Levi just stays where he is he in Galut? No. So if you have an obligation to go to Galut, then you're not fulfilling it. Says the Gemara, but if he went into exile in his own city, still the city it absorbs him. He's not allowed to be killed. So if he stays in his house, he can't be killed. What do you mean? Didn't we just tell you that he has to go into Galut? How's he getting that if he's staying in his own city? There's 2 opinions. 2 opinions into how we make Galut for the Levi. One answer is that he's able to move to another neighborhood. Okay? But when he moves to another neighborhood in his own city, he's stuck in that neighborhood. He can't leave that neighborhood. That neighborhood becomes for him like a Ir Miklat in his area.
Israel also is stuck in that neighborhood?
Well, it depends on his scenario.
I thought we learned that. Okay.
Let's come back to it. Let's come back to that point. If he goes to another city, what's the halakha? He can move around the whole city, no problem. If he moves to another neighborhood, one of the opinions is that he must stay bound to that neighborhood. Why?
Because that's a second.
Because you're not in exile otherwise. So technically, if the guy stays in his own house, is he protected? Yes. Yes. How's he fulfilling galut? By making new boundaries around his neighborhood. His own place is now galut. Is that clear? That's a big chidush. Okay? So we've differentiated between neighborhood and city. Now the idea of a Levi and a Yisrael are really the same. The reason why we're expressing it by Yisrael and Levi is because the order, the way in which they become relevant is in two different cases. Only reason why Yisrael this would happen to him is if he killed accidentally twice. Otherwise, why is he near Miklat? But a Levi only needs to kill once in order for him to already be in a city of refuge, in a city of Leviim.
House arrest.
Sorry?
House arrest.
Neighborhood arrest. So by the way, that exists. They have a thing where your ankle bracelet allows you to go in a perimeter. And that's considered like you're somewhat incarcerated.
I have maybe a stupid question. Is every Levite city an Ir Miklat?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay? We're going to learn the differences between them. Okay? We're going to learn the differences between them. Amar Racha ben Ravika, Racha the son of Ravika said, Maikera, what does the pasuk say? Ki be'ir miklato yeshev. What does it mean when it says ir miklato, in his ir miklat, he should sit, he should stay? What does that teach us? Ir shekaltato kevar, the city that already made him a city of refuge. So we're communicating that a person can achieve the concept of ir miklat even within the same city. Now, what would happen if a Yisrael was decided to move, not to move from one shchuna to another shchuna?
Isn't he free game then?
Sorry?
No, he said technically he's still safe.
Let's say he just stays in his own house. So the Yisrael, according to most opinions, also has this option that I could decide I'm hunkering down here, but I'm not leaving my neighborhood. If he leaves his neighborhood, by the way, since he didn't move, so that, as we said, that's his galut. The second guy, the second Goyel Adam, is able to kill him.
Where?
If he leaves his neighborhood.
Not in the city.
Excellent question. How's he doing that? We just talked about the guy can't even climb on the trunk.
Because his neighborhood now becomes the city.
Excellent.
Yeah, but you have a
For the second guy,
I'm allowed.
for the second guy, one second, for the second guy, since he didn't move, how is he counting his Ir Miklat? Only his neighborhood. Indicating that up until his neighborhood is for me, not an Ir Miklat, for our purposes. What happens if he leaves his shchuna and the first guy kills him?
No good.
He'll be put to death.
The guy who killed him.
First Goel Adam kills him outside of his neighborhood, but inside the larger Ir Miklat. Because for the sake of the first death, he's still in the Ir Miklat. But it's fascinating how you could have two Goel Adams with different halachot, two Ir Miklat simultaneously existing. Huge chidush. And where are we learning it from? Ki be'ir miklato yeshev. It tells us that it's in his Ir Miklat. Like it was already designated as your Ir Miklat. It's a huge chidush. Okay, let's continue with the Mishnah. Everyone got it clear? Mm-hmm. Okay. It says the Mishnah, Ki yosebo, just like this, Rotzeach shegalal Ir Miklato, Rotzeach that goes to Ir Miklat, and the people decide they want to honor him. What does it mean they want to honor him? They want to give him a position, they want something, okay? He has an obligation to tell them, guys, I didn't just move here willy-nilly. I moved here because I am I'm a rotzeach.
They don't make an announcement. Didn't we learn in the beginning they make an announcement when it comes in?
On the way.
On the way, not within the city.
Not in the city, to everybody. Now they want to honor him. He has to say, Rotzeach ani, I'm a killer. Amiru lo, but if they tell him, Afal piken, even though, Where do you have this idea? A person says, I'm a killer. They honor him anyway. New York City. Where else?
California.
Texas. Just the other way around. If you killed the criminal, they make you the sheriff. Okay? Afal Piken, still, they tell him, we know who you are, but we still want to give you the honor of being the rabbi, of being the parnas, of being the gabbai. Yikabel mehem. He's allowed to take it. How do we know? Shneimar, like it says, V'zeh divar rotzeach. This is the word of the rotzeach. Since it says V'zeh divar, not elu divrei, divrei is plural. Divar is singular. Zeh divar rotzeach means that the obligation of the rotzeach to say that he's a rotzeach is a singular obligation. So once he says one time, rotzeach ani, he's already allowed to receive the kavod. Now, the commentators want to know, what in the world does this have to do? Ki yotzeh bo means just like this. Okay? So the commentators actually disagree on what the ki yotzeh bo is. One opinion is, it's got nothing to do with anything. This Mishnah already exists in another location. And when we moved the Mishnah in that location, ki yotzeh bo follows on the Mishnah before, and there's similarities there. Over here, there's no similarities. But we took the whole Mishnah and we just supplanted it, so we said it like it says it there.
Would it only be connected to the other Mishnah if this was the second city, like the second time killing?
No. According to this opinion, there's no connection here. So kiyosebo only means over there, it's likewise. Over here, we just want the halakha, but we didn't remove, we kept the Mishnah as is without changing the language. Okay, that's one opinion. The other opinions are that there are elements of kiyosebo. What's the kiyosebo? The kiyosebo is that part of this moving around that we obligate you is to be able to make sure that the person doesn't feel like they maintain their status after they did this act. A person is liable to feel like, I have nothing to do teshuvah about. I have nothing to feel bad about. I fell off a ladder. What do you want from my life? It was traumatic for me too. And then I landed on the guy. And then it got worse. Then I had to leave my family. I'm a victim here. We're telling the person, it's true that you're a victim, but at the same time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not make mistakes. And he's trying to teach you something too. So the idea is that you should become contrite. If you do not feel that contrition whatsoever, if you're behaving the same way, then it's not going to work. So therefore we make you move mishchuna lishchuna. Same too over here. We want you to be able to turn down positions of honor by saying rotzeach ani. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. The Mishnah, yes?
Question. What if now we got the position, we become the sheriff. Now we can go from his neighborhood to another neighborhood, and they cannot harm him?
I just ruined it because I need you to passcode it.
5333.
Oh, it came back. That was just me trying to figure out how to break into your phone.
Facial recognition.
Okay. So the answer is no. There's no shaliach. Everyone heard his question? Now they gave him a position. So now he's the gabai. Now he's the hazan. Now he's the rabbi. Is he allowed now to go travel to the other part of the city to go give a class? No. Mitzvah.
Wow.
We already learned in the Mishnah.
Can't do nothing.
Not allowed to leave anything, even if there's a court case. Even if there's a court case for death. And is that a mitzvah?
Buried in the neighborhood.
1 second, is that a mitzvah? Maybe that's not a proof. Maybe you just can't give witness. How do you know that's a proof?
Yes.
The Torah says that a person is not allowed to be kovesh eduto. If you have witness to be able to testify, you're not allowed to not give it, indicating that even for the sake of a mitzvah, you're not allowed to travel. Why? Where do we learn that from? Sham. He has to be shama. Sham tehe dirato. Sham tehe mitato. Sham tehe kivurato. Okay, let's continue. Says the Mishnah. Ma'alim ayu sachar laleviim. When they would go into this place for exile, they had to pay the Leviim to be able to rent the house that they were living in. So the Leviim would make livelihood from accidental murderers. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says, Lo ayu ma'alin lahem sachar. They would not give them pay. It was rent controlled. The whole cities of the Leviim. And what was it controlled at? Price was 0. You did not have to pay for, for your lodgings when you were staying in the cities of the Leviim. Okay. Says the Gemara, another example of this same concept. V'chozer l'sirara shahayabo. And let's say the Kohen Gadol dies, and now he leaves his city of refuge, Ir Miklat. Now he wants to come back to be again the rabbi of the Alaner Shul. He wants to be the rabbi of the Deal Synagogue. He says, "Listen, I got out. I'm out. I'm paroled from the Ir Miklat after falling off the ladder." Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Meir says, you get back your sirara. You get back your position, whatever your position was. It might be a position of the rabbinate. It might be a position of power in the Jewish government, whatever it might be. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo haya chozer sirara shehaya bo. He does not get back the position. He does not continue or reassume the position he was in. The Gemara now skips over the first part of the Mishnah and goes directly to the second part, not to the kavod part, but rather to the rent part. Amar Rav Kana. Rav Kana says, Machloket b'shesh. We have a machloket, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says rent free. Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Yehuda says they pay rent. Rabbi Meir says they rent free. Amar Rav Kana says machloket b'shesh. Exactly what you said earlier, Morris. The machloket is only on the 6 cities that are designated. Those cities, we have this machloket. De marsavar lachem leklita. Marsavar lachem means klita, to absorb you, to provide you safe haven. Marsavar lachem lechot tzorchechem. And Rabbi Meir holds lachem means for everything that you need. Hazak Baruch on Sunday. Really amazing. Okay, on not Sunday. When was it? Friday. Says, let's just take a look. Alamak, God bless. Let's just take a look. If you could turn back to the page in the beginning. Okay, let's go to the scriptural passages.
In the beginning that you have to provide the city of refuge for the killer?
Yes.
And provide
Not
everything
free.
for him?
Not free.
I
For pay. But there has to be provided. So in other words, we said that there has to be a marketplace. We didn't say they have to have food coupons. Okay? Let's take a look. If you go back to the Gemara part, I want to look together with you at the Pasuk because it's very important. Okay? Everyone sees it in the column on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. So go all the way back to the beginning. Do you guys have the Gemara?
I didn't know this had this.
Yeah, only in the front.
Oh, wow, that's cool. I don't know why I didn't have it.
Here we go. Okay? You see in the column Yud Gimel Amud Aleph? Do you guys have that Gemara page?
Yeah.
This page? You have this page? Yud Gimel. That's it, exactly. Look in the outer column. The pasuk says, "Ve'ayu lachem he'arim lemiklat," and the cities will be for you as a city of refuge. Migoel, from the one who's trying, the redeemer who's trying to kill you. V'lo yamut harotzeach, and the murderer cannot get killed ad omdo lifnei ha'edah mishpat, until he's in the courthouse and they rule on his case. Okay, let's just look at the second pasuk because the second pasuk is going to come up in the Gemara in a minute. And the cities that you're going to give to the Levim, it's shesh arei miklat, the 6 cities of refuge, asher titenu, that you will give, lanu shama harotzeach, ve'alehem titenu, and on top of them you will also give the Levim, arba'im u'shtayim ir, another 42 cities. Okay, so those are the 2 pesukim that we're going to be dealing with thus far. Says the Gemara, machloket b'shesh. So you see in the pasuk that there's a difference between the 6 and the 42. When did they argue as to whether or not you pay rent? Rabbi Yehuda saying yes, Rabbi Meir saying no, is in the 6. Demar savar lachem. What does it mean the city will be for you, it says in the pasuk? Is it your city, i.e. you don't have to pay rent? Or is it for you not to be killed? Rabbi Yehuda says it's for you not to be killed, meaning you still have to pay rent. Rabbi Meir says no, lachem for you means l'chol tzorchechem. I gave it to you for anything that you might need, Mr. Accidental Killer. When it comes to the other 42 cities, where it doesn't say those words of lachem, in those 42 cities, everyone agrees that you have to pay rent, because you don't have the lachem that Rabbi Meir learned means that it's for you, for all your needs. Clear thus far? That's the opinion of Rav Kana. Amalei Rava. Rava says to Rav Kana, Havadai lachem lechol tzorchechem mashma. 1 second. No. The word lachem means for you. It doesn't mean for you for one thing. It means for you for everything. Lachem means for everything. For all your needs. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir all agree that in the 6 cities, you don't have to pay. Right? So where do they disagree? Their whole machloket was in the 42 cities, if you have to pay. That one holds, and on top of the 6 you give 42, means why are you saying, and on top of the 642? Is it to compare them in terms of the depth of all of its laws, which means even rent-free? Or does it mean, and on top of the 6, which are not only for refuge, but also free, I'm going to give you these cities also rent-free? Everyone understand? So, the first opinion says, the machloket is in the 6, and in the 42 everyone agrees you have to pay. Second opinion holds exactly the opposite. In the 6, everybody agrees you don't have to pay. The she'elah, the question is on the 42. What's the question dependent on? If it says lachem, lachem means for all your needs. But now we said, after telling you that there's 6 cities that you could go, and they're called the cities of refuge. And on those, you don't have to pay rent. We said on that, alehem titenu, another 42. Are those 42 like them or not like them?
They both agree on 6.
Huh?
They both agree on 6. It's free.
Free rent.
So the argument
Question is,
42.
42. So it's like Rav Kahana, exactly the opposite of Rav Kahana. Okay? Savar v'alehem titenu ki hana. Ma hana kol tzorchechem, af hanina mikol tzorchechem. Aval the 6, when it comes to the 6, when it comes to the 6, everyone agrees you don't have to pay. Now, can I just say, if I had to, I'm a nobody. If I had to look at these 2 opinions, Rava and Rav Kahana, look, I really understand what Rava is saying. You know why? Because the Torah calls these 6, the 6 Arei Miklat, the cities of refuge. Then it tells you, as an afterthought, also, there's another 42. It calls the 6 cities of refuge. So, assuming that the other 42, right, are what's it called?
Cities of refuge.
Are added, why didn't it say there's 48 cities of refuge? It must be that there's a difference between the 6 and the 42, right? I would imagine that the ones that are called cities of refuge give the refugee more than the ones that are also cities.
What does it mean? Ve'alehem titnu 42 ir.
And on top of these 6, the alehem, and on them, titinu, give 42. So when I tell you, here's 6 cities of refuge, and also you have to give 42, tell me 48. Clearly, there's a difference between the status of the 6 and the 42. That's true according to Rava and Rav Kahana. But what I'm suggesting is that doesn't it sound, if you had to make a machloket between them about where you're going to pay rent, don't you think that it makes more sense to say that there's a machloket that you don't have to pay rent in the 6? The she'elah of paying rent, yes or no, is in the other ones.
But is it a matter of
Don't you imagine that?
Yeah.
Because then everyone has a reason why the 6 are better, are more refugee friendly than the other ones. According to Rav Kahana, everyone agrees the 42 you have to pay. And when it comes to the 6, there's a machloket if you have to pay. It would turn out then, according to one opinion, you have to pay in the 6 and you have to pay in the 42. So what difference is there between the 6 and the 42 in Rav Kahana?
Did the 6 come
Nothing
before?
at that point.
So,
They're all the same.
so how does Rav Kahana, why does Rav Kahana make sense? Doesn't it sound like I just made a good argument for Rava? You know what the answer is? We already learned the answer to this. There's other differences between the 6 and these 42. One of the differences we said is that the 42 are kolet, they only absorb you if you know that you're going into a city of refuge. What if the guy's traveling, he had no idea, he just walked into a city of refuge? Doesn't help him on the 42. On the 6, it helps. So once you come up with any law that's different, I could say that's why there's a differentiation in status. Not because of the rent. The difference is in the refugee status
But
that it
the
affords.
6 exists before the 42.
The 3 existed before the 6
So can
existed,
you
and the
differentiate
3
on
existed before the
timing-
42.
On timing, meaning the 42 came later. It was
No,
an annex.
you
It
can't.
was-
You can't distinguish. You know why? Because in the command, none of them existed. And here we're dealing in the command, which is pre-anything. Okay. Says the Mishnah. What's the halacha? He goes back to the position of power, whatever the position of authority or power that he had, he goes back to it. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo haya chozer. The Gemara now brings a Braita. Tan Rabbanan, V'shava mishpachto ve'achuzat avotav yashuv. He goes back to his family, ve'el achuzat avotav, and to the achuzah, the inheritance of his fathers, yashuv, he should return. What does that mean? Lemishpachto ushav, ve'en ushav lema shehechziku avotav. Achuzat avotav means his father's achuzah. Le'echoz means to hold on to something, to grab onto something. It's used in the terms, in these kinds of terms, achuzah refers to the person's properties, that which he owned, okay? So it's ironic because in English, you would use the word person's holdings. So that's like the literal usage. Le'echoz means to hold something, okay? Shnaim ochazim batalit, opening words of Masechet Baba Metzia. But you would also refer to a person's assets as his holdings. Part of the reason is because possession is 9/10 of the law. So you understand, the very fact, how do you decide something's yours 9/10 of the time? Just because of the fact that you're holding it. That's called muhzak, like we mentioned many times before. Okay.
He does get the property back, or he doesn't?
No, says the Gemara, says the Braita, what do you get back? You get back achuzat avotav, that which your father owned, but not the enoshav, right? The mishpachto ushav, he returns to his family, but not to that which his father's, with his ancestors held. And what does that refer to? To something that he inherited, a position that he inherited from them. Let's say he was the nasi, or he was the rabbi. By the way, I mentioned this before. When it comes to positions of the rabbinate of leading, it automatically goes to the son of the rabbi that's there prior, unless he's not hagun, unless he's not appropriate for the job. In other words,
If there's a bigger Talmud in the town?
yes, it's not that he needs to be the best person for the job. It's that he needs to be not ra'ui. Fascinating.
I'm going to tell you a story about that afterwards.
Okay. Now, so according to this, I would imagine that the guy he gets the position from his fathers. Says the Gemara, no. What does he get? V'shavel mishpachtov el achuzat avotav, but he does not get back what his ancestors had before. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says no. Af hushav lema she'echziku avotav. No, he gets that too because it says el achuzat avotav. What does it mean el achuzat avotav? Ke avotav, like the holdings of his fathers. Now, what does Rabbi Yehuda do with this pasuk? Because it's the same pasuk for Rabbi Yehuda as it is for Rabbi Meir, right?
Yeah.
So how is Rabbi Yehuda interpreting the pasuk that says you return to your family and to the holdings of your fathers? How does he say now that you don't get that back? Doesn't the pasuk say explicitly the way Rabbi Meir understands?
It's like not being able to vote.
Holdings, it doesn't say titles.
Takes away, he loses something from himself from the Yom
Okay, but how does he see that in the pasuk? The pasuk says you return to your family and to the holdings of your fathers.
Has he not seen the title?
The pasuk says it explicitly.
Shav and Yashuv is something.
V'shav el mishpachto ve'el achuzat avotav yashuv. It literally says that he gets back the holdings of his fathers. So how does he understand that? Yeah, what do you guys think? So I think on a simple level, before we get into any other pshat levels, on a simple level, what are we communicating over here? I think the answer is that he goes back to his father's holdings if he's in that position. In other words, you can return back to your father's holding. Anything that your fathers would have held in your state, you could have. But you now are not compared to them. In other words, let's say my father had this position. Yeah, but your father had this position without being an accidental murderer. So you're not like him. So you return to your family, all your family things, yeah, we got that. But the idea that you should come back and have a position you didn't have before. See, it's the same title, but I'm not the same person. So therefore, my fathers wouldn't have had this in the position that I'm in. That's, I believe, the simple way of understanding how Rabbi Yehuda understands this concept. Okay? Let's look at Rashi for 1 second. El mishpachto be'eved ivri ktiv kishiyotze chofshi b'shesh u'b'yover. By Eved Ivri, this pasuk is written by a Hebrew slave. What happens when he gets out of that position? He goes back el mishpachto, right? But he also goes back el achuzat avotav, lema shehuchzegu avotav, el achuzat avotav ke'avotav. So what does Rabbi Meir learn? Sefa demilter Rabbi Meir here. Umevi ra'ayal dvaram sof mekrash chozel gdulato shneimar ve'el achuzat avotav el kol cheskat avotav. He gets everything that they had. So Rabbi Yehuda says you get what you would have had if you're the same as them. Rabbi Meir learns, no, the pasuk went out of its way to mention the avotav again, to tell you, even if you're not in the same position, we still return you to what they would have had. Okay? Let's continue, and we'll finish to the Mishnah. The Gemara says, V'chen bagolat. So too, so if it says that by the Hebrew servant when he goes into slavery, or comes out of slavery, also over here, Kishu Omer Yashuv, when it says Yashuv, that he returns, right? L'rabot et harotzeach. It includes the rotzeach, includes someone who's also returning to what's it called? To the place that he was before. So the end of this braita tells us, and also somebody who goes into galut. What does that mean? The Gemara says that's communicating our machloket over here, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Kidetanya, Yeshuv rotzeach eretz achuzato. The rotzeach goes back to the land of his achuzah. Le'eretz achuzato ushav. He goes back to the land of his achuzah. He does not go back to get what his fathers wanted. So by Eved Ivri, the pasuk tells us something very, very clear, very simple, right? And Rabbi Yehuda explains it the way he explains it. But when it comes now, they say at the end of the Braita, V'chem bagola, indicating the same machloket that they had by Eved Ivri, they also have over here. And now they plug it into our Pesukim. Le'eretz achuzato ushav, ve'eno shav l'ma shechziku avotav. The Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, afu shav l'ma shechziku avotav. He even goes back to get what his forefathers, the positions his forefathers have. Gamar, seva me'atam. We learn, shiva, returning from over there. So what is the Gemara over here saying? We learn from a Gzerah Shava, Yashuv, returning, that the same way I hold over there the halakha, I hold over here the halakha. Why does the Gemara have to do this? The Gemara has to do this because Rabbi Meir had an extra pasuk over there to communicate that you even get the achuzah, the positions that they had. How would you learn that over here where you didn't have it? Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, you get that because of a Gzerah Shava, Shiva, Yashuv. Yeah, question.
When the Kohen Gadol died, all the killers went home.
Correct.
The city's emptied out completely and then they reset.
Well, the Leviim lived there anyway.
So all of them went home and then they really reset. It's almost like the Yovel when the Kohen Gadol died.
Very similar, exactly. And that's the Yashuv, Yashuv. Let's look at Rashi. We'll end with the words of Rashi before we finish the perek. Everyone see the Rashi? Go back to Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Just like you have the machloket by a Hebrew servant, kach machloket by rotzeach. There's also the same machloket by a killer, shegala, who goes into exile. V'chazar b'mitat kohen, who goes back home when the kohen dies. U'mehacha yalif, and we learn it from here. Tikishu omer kan yashuv. When it says over here, he returns. Kira yitera, it's an extra pasuk. Dematzi lemiktav v'shav. It could have said, and he returns el mishpachto ve'el achuzat avotav. It doesn't have to say he returns to his home and he returns to his father's holdings. It could have said he returns to both. The extra time it says Yashuv is there to give you a Gezerah Shava. What does the Gezerah Shava give you? L'rabot harotzeach, demufne ladun emenu. It's extra to give you the Gezerah Shava. Ne'emar kan Yashuv. It says over here the word Yashuv. Ne'emar berotzeach. It says by Eved every Yashuv. It says also by Rotzeach, by a killer, Yashuv harotzeach. Yashuv harotzeach le'etz achuzato. He returns to his land of his inheritance. Kid mefaresh azil. Mai v'chen bagola. What does it mean, therefore, also by someone who goes into exile? Maskana. And gamar seva seva me'atam. So whatever Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir's position is with regards to an Eved Ivri, it's also going to be with regards to a person who goes into Galut. So you have a scenario where a person who's the leader of all, the Nasi of all the Jewish people. Imagine Rabbi Yehuda Nasi falls off the ladder. God forbid. He loses his position, goes into Galut. Then what happens? He comes back out, reassumes his position. Now I had one question on this. Who can guess my question?
Can someone else assume the position in his stead?
Someone else presumes position. When I come out, he leaves. What's my question?
Get change for 100 or no?
That's not my question. My question is, we learned that when the rabbi goes into Galut, his yeshiva goes with him. So he was Rosh Yeshiva before, he's Rosh Yeshiva now. So we learned clearly that the person maintains that status. The answer is that's true. If your status,
The rabbi was the killer.
both ways.
Oh, that was both. If the rabbi is the killer, his students go with him,
Yeah.
or if the student is the killer, the rabbi still goes with him.
Remember we said, the Gemara says, we learned from here, you got to be careful. I said both
Who are your
ways.
students are?
Right? Who your rabbis. So the answer to that is, it's true. If you're in a scenario where your position is mobile and it comes with you, great. But like as an example, if God forbid it happened to be that Nasi, what, all the Jewish people are going to go into exile? It's not a possibility. Right? So when it's not a possibility, of course the halakha would be that the sirawa would change. I had one question then. So let's say the guy, ready for this one? Yeah. The guy goes to Galut. His yeshiva comes with him. He now has his position of power in Galut. Does he need to say, before he gives his first shi'ur to the boys,
I'm a killer.
Rotzeach ani? Excellent question.
Isn't it a humbling? Didn't it say that that's humbling for them?
Yeah.
That's why he does it. It's almost like it's a part of his
Correct. Teshuvah.
Teshuvah.
He would.
Which makes sense.
So I'd imagine the halakha would be the same, but the Mishnah only mentions it with regards to the people of Ir Miklat having to mention Rotzeach ani. I imagine that if every one of his students just was forced to pack up their bags and move with him, everybody knows Rotzeach ani. Isn't the fact that they're moving with him an expression of once they know Af al Piken, that the halakha is once they say even still that we count it as if he already knows?
Maybe he still has to say it.
Maybe he still has to say it. Where would we learn that from?
From
The pasuk. V'zeh devar rotzeach. So I learned it. There's a big machloket on this, by the way. We said that it limits you to tell you v'zeh devar that you only have to say it once, but it also tells you that you have to say it. Okay, so we could learn that from the same pasuk. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.